Yes, yes. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Ill Communication. Today, I am hanging out with my very good friend, Andrew Luck, and my new friend, Jack. We are hanging out in the studio here in Seattle, and we're geeking out and talking about different Ableton techniques, and I thought, shit, it's time to put on the camera. So, Andrew is really good at making scratchers in Ableton, and they sound a lot like this. So, as you can tell, there's a lot of different sonic possibilities there, and he's been experimenting with some new scratching and gating techniques, and so have I too. So today we're going to just talk about different scratching and gating techniques and just kind of geek out and have fun. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how your scratchers got started and how you first came up with some of the ideas that made the scratchy sound possible?
Well, I think the scratching set, or the scratching sort of, we call it the scratch rack in the Splatinum sets, and that really came from us wanting a drunk-proof instrument to play while we're sort of DJing and performing.
Okay, do you want to bring up the OG Splatinum scratch rack and just show us where it started?
Yeah.
Okay,
totally.
so
let me open up that
for those of you who have been living under a rock and don't know who Splatinum is Andrew's very, very awesome band with Dosati.
Yeah,
and
Dosati, Flare Light.
Yeah,
he's got a new sexy alias.
A new sexy alias.
It's a super secret sexy music. If you want to put it down, put on some Flare Light.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That's when it's time. Okay, cool. So yeah, they have this band together, and they do crazy live PAs, and actually have some very innovative use of combination style between arrangement view and session view, and they make all kinds of really cool racks where you can scratch things and jam and rock and do awesome fun things. All right, so here, why don't you show us this the OG scratch rack.
Cool.
Oh, it's loading up here.
Let me just light some candles while we open
Nice.
this project file, and we will commence our seance.
Okay, cool.
Of these,
So yeah, that's all just getting started.
Yeah.
Rock and roll.
Fire up the bass machines.
Yeah, man. Oh, hey, wow. Hey, it's a party.
Oh, it sounds like some music.
Okay, cool. So it seems to have started here.
Let's see here.
Awesome. Okay, so this is a Splatinum set here. I'll get it so we can see on the camera what is going on.
Yeah. So we've got this is some of our arrangement view stuff, and these tracks can all be triggered on the fly with these session markers.
Sweet. So, and you've MIDI learned those those arrangement view markers to so that you can use the arrangement view in a non-linear way.
Exactly. So it's designed so that you can basically trigger some samples. Like basically on the different scenes, we have some different loops and some different percussion sounds. Because you never can have enough Little John on the track.
No, never, never.
John?
Basically, Little John.
Little John.
You know, when you've got...
He's more medium-sized. I met him. When he lacks in height, he makes up for... He's really stocky.
Yeah.
I'd say medium, but that just doesn't have the same...
But he's a heavyweight in the business department.
He is definitely a heavyweight in the business department.
I saw him on the Trump show. So, basically, we've got some loops here. And these are... It's designed so that you can trigger loops that play in the session view. So you can trigger loops in your session view, and say you're leaving a song, you can play loops from a percussion loop from the last song sort of as your outro, and you can MIDI map these session viewpoints so that you can start mixing into your next track.
Okay, and you know, just to be clear, okay, so the arrangement view is a very linear view. That's this left to right view. Or here, switch back to arrange, please. That's the left to right view. So you can see, you know, that looks like you're making a track or laying out a set. And then the session view in Ableton, that is this other view where it's non-linear, right? And that's where you jam and play a set. And now the kind of common wisdom is that if you're playing out of arrange view, you're doing a press play set where you hit play, it starts at the beginning, it continues till the end, there's no jamming, the tracks are staying in the same order, etc. But you see, Andrew has managed to circumvent that limitation of arrange view and combine it with session view by MIDI mapping these markers here, these arrangement markers. You can see that they have
Yep.
So yeah, you can see that they have the beginning of the track there, and the major, you know, backing track that has most of the track will start playing. But then the question arises: what happens when you want to hop from one chunk of the arrangement view to another? Well, if you were to simply trigger the next track, there would be no mixing happening. It would be a harsh cut. So to get around that problem, he has pieces of each track which are available in session view, which allow you to mix out of one track while starting another track in arrangement view. I think that's pretty damn cool, dude. Like,
it allows you to it allows you to go into an autopilot mode if you want to focus on more like you performing soft synths or blaps or fiddling with your scratch rack. So you can have a bunch of cooked up mixes that already work, and you can rock that and do live instrumentation or whatever. One person, you can punch in on top of pre-existing tracks if you've got everything broken out into stems, or you can if the crowd seems to be ready for like a different style or genre, you can make the executive decision to switch to your other marker point in the track. And if you MIDI map it, you know, you don't even really have to click around.
And how are you doing tempo? Is there master tempo automation?
The tempo is controlled. It's automated in arrangement.
So yeah, so there is master tempo automation and arrangement. See, working in arrangement view, there's a lot of things that you can only do in arrangement view. For example, video, right?
Right.
Video won't come out of a clip in the session view, but if you have a video timeline to your set that's in arrangement view, you could use this technique of Andrew's and just lay out a bunch of, you know, YouTube videos or whatever, cut them up in Ableton and lay them out so that your Ableton would be feeding a screen, and that would all remain in time with the music. So you could play like a rap video, for example, which is very, very difficult to do from session view. And basically, when I was on the Church of Bass tour, when I was doing video out of Ableton before I switched over to Serato, I actually had a second computer that was running arrangement view, where in my session view, I had, you know, like let's say I trigger the breakdown on a given track, I would trigger an audio clip in my session view Ableton, and then there would be a MIDI note that went out and triggered the appropriate arrange view section on a second computer. But with this technique, it gets around the need for a second computer to do video, a lot of automation problems that are really difficult in session view. You can get around those in arrangement view. If you want to do a set with stems, for example, it's really difficult to cue around in a big pack of stems. Like, let's say you have like 5 channels involved in your track. That's quite difficult to manage from the session view. So this is really cool.
You can totally jump to a part of the set that doesn't even have any audio in it, and automated. There's an automated or auto magic BPM change, if you will. So say you're like, okay, I want to move in. I want to just do like a finger drumming performance. You can hop into a section that doesn't have any clips sequenced. And when you're done, you can trigger the start point of another song that already pre-exists in your arrangement, and it'll start playing, it'll go into that, that part of your performance.
Super cool.
And it also, the MIDI trigger for these clips, or for these session markers, is also, it also is mapped to your global quantization. So it awaits the end of the cycle if that's 1 bar, or 4 bars or whatever. So musically it should start, in time.
Great.
So yeah.
That's really cool. Okay, so then that kind of like innovative use of the combination style between session view and arrangement view is forming the backbone, and then you come in with these really cool scratchers and stuff. So so let's talk about scratching and gating techniques. So do you want to take us through the OG scratcher in this?
Oh yeah,
that was why we opened this before.
We opened this guy.
But yeah, the arrangement view session view thing I think was worth it. It was worth the tangent.
Oh yeah,
it was definitely worth the tangent. All right, so here I'm gonna just go back behind the camera so I can see what you're doing here and aim it a little better.
Cool.
And then we'll get into. Okay, so here, why don't you show us the rack?
I'm gonna jump to. I'm gonna add a locator, and I'm gonna basically jump to a spot in time that doesn't have anything. I'm gonna trigger a couple loops. Right now that was set to 140, but I think we want something like 95 BPM. I like scratching.
Nice scratching BPM.
Scratching.
And we're going back up here to the locators.
So, I will. So basically these are one-shot samples here.
And these are coming out of the session view, which is why it keeps starting when you hit them.
Yeah, exactly. And they're actually quantized, I think, 8ths or 16ths. So you can't even really mess it up.
Yeah.
And these are like short loops here. And then I have the scratcher on a different scene. And so the start point and the transposition are mapped to my X and Y. So just like how I would control the movement of the record back and forth, I can which affects, like in physics, that would affect the speed, would affect the pitch, and I can change the pitch with the transposition, and you're also, by moving the record back and forth, you're also changing the start point of the sound. So this is an off on, and this dial controls the gate, and this controls the rate.
Okay, and so why don't we open up the sampler?
Okay.
And you can just show us what some of these parameters look like, because just naming them, I think, is probably going to be a little confusing for some people.
Yeah, totally. So we've got we have some improvisational groups in our live set here, and one of those is the scratch rack.
Okay, so here we go. Here's the rack.
Got a sweet rack. I'm gonna show it to you.
Nice rack, bro. Oh, you broke it. You broke it.
Full screen.
Oh my god.
Yeah. That's how you know you're doing it right, is that it breaks.
Dude,
Go check out Jack's music, Photonic Boom on SoundCloud while you wait for Ableton to reboot.
You should go to soundcloud.com/photonic_boom. Yeah, I actually have a remix of one of Splatinum's tracks, Pumping Quarters.
Nice.
Arcade show, what was it, Arcade Peep Show? Anthem.
Originally an Arcade Peep Show. Anthem.
Not anymore.
Jack got PG with the lyrics and X-rated with the bass drum, so you should check that out.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right, words. So yeah, sometimes software crashes because that's just the way it is. And if you don't like it, you can call tech support and get really, really boring explanations of why. Yeah.
You should definitely get mad at the person who answers the phone. It's
Yeah, oh yeah, always get mad at the person. That really makes people want to help you when you get mad at them and yell and swear. That's just like, that's what tech support people love to hear.
Be nice to the guys at Native Instruments, the guys and gals.
Yeah, no, we're actually just kidding.
They're
Yell at
really-
tech support people, they do not want to help you and you will not get help.
Yeah.
Catch more flies with honey.
I spent some time in those trenches myself.
I answer tech support at Ill Methodology all the time, and man, some of the hater emails you get would blow your hair back, bro. It's just insane. All right, so we're resolving our technical difficulties here, and we're coming in to check out the OG Scratcher before we get into some of these more advanced scratch techniques. We're experimenting a bit here and trying to come up with new ways to do this that are going to be more fun,
more flexible,
and more flexible. And I have some techniques that I've been doing with Machine and with Max for Live that I think are pretty fun. Sweet. That we can get into here. All right, so he's just re-automating us back to where we were so that we can scratch without a backing track. Okay, cool. And we're back. Okay, cool. All right, so let's get your sweet rack out, and then we can continue down the rabbit hole.
Take a look at this rack
of scratching in Ableton.
In the Jams group, we've got the Scratch Rack channel.
Okay, so the Scratch Rack channel. I noticed that there is an arpeggiator to start the rack.
There is. Now, there is an arpeggiator, and
what's that doing?
The arpeggiator is what triggers the rate of the transform. So normally you would be transforming the volume of the sound with the fader on a mixer, and so we decided that it would be cool if we could control that rate, and one way to do it that would be interesting and also have some digital flavor that a record wouldn't have is to put that on an arpeggiator, and that gives you the ability to,
So and by transform you mean you basically using it to gate here. So you can see that the gate is being automated. So you're using that to
so
trigger and gate the sound, creating a transform type effect.
All right. So we need to hit stop all clips here real quick.
Stop all them clips.
Stop them. They're too crazy.
Yeah.
So and so basically, this here. I
think you gotta. Yeah, you gotta
turn this on.
Yeah, and then you need to solo that guy. Yeah, and then get a little.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, cool.
Oh, this was working. What's going on?
The volume is down on it. Oh no, there it's back up.
Are we rolling? Run the track.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Do you need to have MIDI coming in? It's not the recorded arm isn't armed.
Here we go. Let's see.
This is like there's a lot of automation in the set, so
there we go.
Okay. those grains that you're hearing, those are not. That really is cool. Sweet. So you got your XY controlling. XY is doing sample start and transposition, and then the note on starts feeding the arpeggiator, which is acting to basically create grains, and then gate here, the gate is giving it that choppy scratch sound.
Exactly. So the gate lengthens the sound. So if I open the gate, it'll play the sound longer. So if I'm working at a tighter increment, if I'm working at a tighter increment, I like to bring the gate down so there's a little more space between the retrigger of the sound.
Yeah, it sounds a little sharper and more rhythmic, as opposed to just kind of like scrubbing through the sample.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on with this chain selector over here?
So the chain selector is a bunch of different samplers, and I've got the sounds alternating between. It's just alternating between different sounds.
Okay, and how are you using that chain selector? Like, are you selecting with the pads here?
So I have a range of pads. These are set to like in chromatic C, so that whenever I mapped it to the MIDI here.
So yeah, this is something not everybody knows. Did you know that you can MIDI learn a range of MIDI keys to a parameter, whether it's a chain selector or a fader or a knob? You see how there's displaying a range of keys. Well, when you MIDI learn, if you press one key and then while holding that key, press another key, it creates a range. And that range here is going between, what is that, 8, 10, 12 positions?
Yeah, it looks like I've got like 12 sounds.
Yeah. Here. And then, so how did you fine tune that? You check 12 keys and then you hit the map thing?
So I actually just mapped a range of however many sounds that I've got, and it just dialed it in for me.
It did it automatically?
Yeah.
Oh, wow,
1,
I've never
2,
done
3,
it that.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
So you just counted 12 sounds.
I just used 12 sounds that were one semitone apart each, so chromatic.
Okay. And what MIDI notes were those? Was that first one at the top there? Was that C0 or?
Let's see. It tells us in the MIDI here, so it looks like
so it's C3. Wow.
Yeah.
So Ableton's clever. Figured it out for you.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. So that saved me a little time.
Cool. So you're selecting so you're selecting the samples there, and then where are the MIDI notes coming from that are feeding that arpeggiator? Are those coming? Are you playing those in?
I actually have that MIDI.
There's a clip.
It's a clip that lives for like the almost 3 hours of music that we have in our arrangement view. That MIDI clip stretches across the entire thing. And
wow, there's a 3 hour long MIDI clip in this set. Craziness.
And
that's just a loop of one note every quarter note.
Repeats.
Okay, so that's what's feeding the arpeggiator.
Yeah, that sends
cool.
the MIDI trigger to the arpeggiator, and it's actually on quarter notes.
Cool.
And so that's what keeps it going. And then I have this, excuse me, this little cough here.
Okay, so what's doing the volume? I notice you're turning the volume off and on.
So there's just a button that goes on and off.
Oh, it's just a toggle.
And this button is also my clips that I turn it off. So
That's really amazing. Thank you so much for sharing the Splatinum scratch techniques with all of us here. We all very much appreciate it.
Oh yes.
So that's where this scratching thing started. Arpeggiator with the gate manipulated, and that's being fed by a MIDI note to create the rhythm. Then the parameters being modulated are the transposition, as well as the sample start position. And then, oh shit, we're running out of batteries here.
Too much awesome.
Yeah, too much awesome. The transposition and the sample start position are being modulated, as well as the arpeggiator rate and the gate. I'm gonna go get the charger. Why don't you talk about how this technique has evolved a bit?
Well, I have wanted to have the same like arpeggiated rate happening on all of my sounds and drum racks too. So basically, have been creating some slice to MIDI presets that will allow me to take after I collect a bunch of samples that go together. Actually, Jack and I have been working on this where after we found a huge collection of sounds that fit really well together, we basically have found are experimenting with ways to include an arpeggiator and the sort of scratch technique of the start point and the transposition into the slice to MIDI preset, so that we don't have to do all this mapping by hand. So that once we come up with a ton of sounds that go well together, they already map and slice out to a scratch rack and live in a perfect place. And are ready to rock.
So how do you create a slice to MIDI preset?
It's super easy. If you can actually go into your user library over here, and then there's like these defaults folder, and basically all you do is you can create a simpler mapping with a drum rack. And you just drop that one simpler, and however you have it mapped, you drop it into not your audio to MIDI folder, but your slicing.
Yeah.
And so right now I've got these things called scratch.
Okay, so, and are you dragging? Just to be clear, are you dragging from the simpler, or are you dragging the chain inside the rack, or are you dragging the whole rack, or like what exactly are you dragging?
I actually just drag one of these. So if you look at this scratch preset, which I drug out of here into its own new track by itself. Excuse me.
Oh boy.
So right now this is just one little. It's one sampler with the arp, and everything's mapped how I want it to exist. Once I slice everything to MIDI. So. Basically, when I'm done with that, I can just drag...
And then you drag the whole drum rack in. You drag the drum rack in, and then name it.
And then, I name it, and it creates that preset.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so then it auto-magically creates and maps all of these parts to every sound in my rack. So there's also another trick that we can talk about, and it's the super top secret... invisible.
Well, not top secret for long. You sure you want to share this? Okay, super secret, invisible.
It's called Map to Siblings.
Oh yes, in the options.txt file.
Options.txt.
All right, my camera battery died. I take full responsibility for that. I totally fucked up, and I'm a bad person. Is that enough contrition? Okay.
Way to own it.
All right. So yeah, totally. That was my bad. Anyway, what Andrew is saying is that if you have not made a slicing preset, you can still copy your macro mappings to the siblings, which is what you call other similar plugins inside of a drum rack. And there's a secret option inside of Ableton that you need to enable in the options.txt file. Now, if you just look up in Google or your search engine of choice, options.txt plus Ableton, you'll find a few different blog articles about how to enable some very useful hidden features in Ableton. Copy macro mapping to siblings is one of those features, and you basically just have to browse into your user library, and I think it's in the preferences, and then you go to your version of Ableton, you make a file in your notepad called options.txt, and you put a little dash, and it's enable map to siblings, but yeah, you have to copy it in exactly. So look it up on the internet. Don't just start typing things in that file and hope for the best, because that won't work. But yeah, if you give that a searching, you'll find that, and then that way, you know, if you had made a really sweet scratcher inside of your drum rack and you wanted to have that also do other other samplers in the rack, you could copy that mapping over the siblings. So just look up options.txt and hidden features and Ableton, and you'll find all kinds of blog articles about how to do that. So he was saying that that's another very useful thing to know when you're making these scratch racks.
Time saver, yeah. And a lot of time goes into sort of dialing in the right range of pitch and the right map value, how many values you want to use with your MIDI mapping, and so that's where like the details come in, and it does take some time to get it sort of dialed in, but it's definitely well worth the wait, because then you can get literally really hands-on with the sound. And I love using these XY pads.
Yeah, they're super awesome.
It allows you to control, just like a push encoder with a on-off, like this isn't a push encoder, but like a dial that has an on-off, you can use that as a momentary and then change a value and release it and it's off. Or with this, you can manipulate one value, like a pitch, and then in this example, a start point, simultaneously with one hand. And
super
when you're playing music, you can't really get enough hands, usually.
No.
So
cool. Awesome. So I want to come in here and talk a little bit about some kind of developments that I have been developing here. If you want to, maybe just be careful not to undock the plug there. We might end up in a bit of hot water. Okay. So this is a technique that I've been doing. Yeah, see if you can get a piece of the screen there. Yeah, if you flip this guy like that.
Oh yeah.
Then it becomes normal camera mode. Just make sure that it's still recording there. Okay, cool. So when you are gating things in Ableton, you get a lot of really annoying clicks and pops, right? And that's why your gating with the MIDI technique is so cool, is because you're not like let's say you have a track mute and you want to use automation to flicker a track mute on and off in Ableton. It's gonna pop and click, and also Ableton, they don't have any plugin delay compensation, which is fantastically irritating because each plugin generates a little bit more latency and a little bit more latency until, you know, by the time your track is done, you have so many plugins that you can't finger drum anymore, and you know, when you're automating gates on and off, they'll click like crazy and it can be really maddening, right? So I've been racking my brain trying to think like, how can I make really, you know, sweet gates that are going to not click and be playable. One thing that I've noticed is Machine is a really, like, I mean, it's definitely very limited, and a lot of Ableton users kind of like look down their noses at it because of how limited it is. But it does a lot of things that Ableton doesn't, and one of those things that it does is plugin delay compensation. So you can, you know, keep finger drumming no matter how much, you know, if it can run your session, it can run it at the same latency the entire session, or you know, maybe there's a little bit of latency. I don't know. I haven't really noticed much latency in Machine. I've been running some pretty bulky sets, so I was trying to figure out a way to combine that latency compensation with working in Ableton, right? And one of my favorite Max for Live devices is this little enveloper here, okay? And this envelope, there's a MIDI one, there's an audio one, and you know, there's also an instrument one. And basically, whenever a signal comes into this guy, it will make an envelope, and you can map it to different destinations. So in this case, I have a drum rack with a bunch of these envelopes in it, and they are going to be automating Machine, and Machine's going to be doing some gating. So this is a copy of Nexus, and I've got just like a generic wobble patch on here to illustrate. And if you go into the input-output properties, yeah, definitely getting close on this one. If you go into the input-output properties, you can see here that this copy of Nexus is being sent to my Machine, which I've called Automator. I'm going to just send this out the master so you can hear what it sounds like without any effects. right? So now I've routed it into machine. So there's a MIDI note here that's just constantly playing a C over and over and over again into Nexus to make our wobble. But that audio could be any piece of starting material, okay? Sometimes you could have multiple channels running through this gator thing. So now in here, there are different envelopes on each one of these 6 pads in my drum rack. And you know, I will eventually go all the way up that drum rack, but that's as many different effects as I felt like programming, you know, before I forget, I think like we had to go to a birthday party or something, you know, interruptions. But anyway, so each one of these envelopes is going to control a parameter in machine. So I'll show you how I did the machine routing. So in machine, each sound has its own inputs and outputs. When you route audio to machine, it comes in on ext2 for some reason. So each one of these cells I've set routed to ext2. Right, and they're going to be receiving audio from the channel that's just spewing out wobs, and this is the gain level of that. Right, so now to be able to automate that from the host, I busted out this little drop down here in machine and went to the automation page. Here's MIDI, which you can, you know, have a controller control machine, but I want the host to control machine. So I went into host and then I enabled it here. I'll disable it and then enable it again, right? That's how that works. And then in the host, if you want to have that come in, you go to configure and then bop bop and then in it comes, right? So then it'll show up if you click underneath it where it says to host in machine. If configure hit here, it'll come up. So now, how do you get the envelope to affect that? Well, what you would do is you would go over to the envelope, and each envelope has this little parameter at the bottom of the envelope field, and that is where you map the envelope. So I'm going to hit X, so now it's waiting to be mapped, so it says map. And if I click map, then I can go over here to machine and click on the destination, boom. And now that enveloper, every time a MIDI note comes in here, it's going to automate this up, providing some gain to our signal. Right? Very cool. So the thing that makes it not click is on the envelope, instead of attack 0 and release 0, those are each set to 1. And that means that there is a very, very tiny fade at the beginning and at the end of that gate, which is going to eliminate all of the clicking. You can also specify maximum minimums, etc., etc., etc. So anyway, basically in this machine, I repeated that process with different effects. The first one is a gate, the second one is a grain stretch, the third one is a lo-fi, the fourth one is a frequency shifter, the fifth one is a reverse effect inside a guitar rig, the sixth one is a grain stretch, etc. And I'm using machine as a host to put all of these different momentary gate chains into a format that, you know, is kind of contained. And then I save that as a preset. And if I go here into my user library, if I go to my 2014 here, program glitch effects, automator start, then I can just drag that on and feed it with any data I want, right? And now that I have these 6 chains, right, I can play them, and they'll kind of sound like I'm playing different notes, but they're actually different momentary gate effects on the bass. And that sounds like this. Right? So hey, what's up with this one? What's going on there? Well, that's a double envelope. If I go to number 5, you can see here that this first envelope is controlling the gate exactly as the other envelopes were that I showed you earlier. And then this second envelope has a long attack and a long decay, and that's controlling the pitch parameter here on my guitar rig. If I go to the plugin, oh no, that's on the 6th one, on the grain stretch. And if you look here at the pitch, and that's basically the exact same process that I used to to get the input gain going on the first one, right? I just go to automation, go to host, make sure that the configure is clicked on the plugin so that it's waiting to know which thing to automate, and then you can send it to Ableton. So this process may seem a little convoluted, but you have gates with 0 latency that do not ever click, and you can have 16 or more different effects set up and then drum your effects and gating onto your channel. And in a lot of my recent tracks, I'll have this on my bus, you know, it'll be on my whole bass bus, and I can just turn like a bass line with constant notes into a rhythmic bass line with lots of crazy effects really easily, or I could run like a whole bunch of different chord progressions. And if you listen to Flume, for example, like in the Flume remix of Tennis Court by Lord, or in his remix of You and Me by Disclosure, you can hear these chord wobs going through these like really nice enveloped gate effects. You can make those with automation in Ableton, but you run into that plugin delay compensation problem and they start clicking and popping, and you will honestly be ready to stab yourself in the eyes. So this technique with Machine is a great way around it, but really you can still do it with Ableton if you're willing to deal with a little bit of plugin delay. The main thing is to use that Max for Live enveloper with a little tiny fade on the beginning and the end. So how this applies to scratching is if you were to have like a sound with an automated pitch, like maybe you have, you know, a vocal with a pitch going up and down, or, you know, you could have a MIDI fighter on one hand where you're playing different, different samples, and on your other hand you could be gating them, or, you know, maybe you have a MIDI fighter that you're playing where, you know, as you tip the MIDI fighter, that could be controlling pitch or whatever, and you could be, you know, bending the sound around and then gating it with your other hand. You can do some pretty advanced digital kind of gating and scratch techniques that would not at all be even remotely possible with a turntable, and can turn something as generic as that like default wobble sound in Nexus into something that's like really just sounds like, you know, that's like you can make a really kind of cool riffy bass line out of it like that, or a scratch, or gate some chords or whatever. But yeah, so I've been really getting into using these envelopers in combination with Machine to make gates that don't click and have different effects in the chain.
Oh yeah.
Words. So do you have any other things that you want to add? Any more scratchy talk?
I mean,
for
just
our listeners and viewers.
Just a pro tip with Machine: you can now use tractor effects, and tractor effects are awesome.
Yeah, that pitch bendy one, that was one of the tractor grain effects. Yeah, they're super, super sweet. Yeah, and I mean, really, you know, a lot of people, you know, they approach DAWs like, oh, you're an Ableton person, or you're a Logic person, or like, I even seen, like, when I started using Serato to do my sets, because it has video, people would be like, it was like I switched sides in a war, you know? They're like so mad. They're like, but bro, I thought you used Ableton. Like, what's going on? And, you know, really, you know, I mean, yes, it's true, you know, jack of all trades, master of none, but at the same time, there are these little differences between the way DAWs handle things like plugin delay compensation, or video, or even like using some of the Logic effects, like RD, my best friend and housemate. He's chief mastering engineer at Twin Peaks Studios, and he does just like the wickedest mastering, and half of the time, you know, he's using like the Logic limiter, and you know, he and Seth Drake, who does the mastering for Bass Nectar, they sat down and just like A/B'd like every commercial limiter on the market, and they found that the actual, like, if you want just a straight up like really just the best possible limiter you can use for mastering, the Logic one really, like, it was amazing in the tests, you know. So RD, he produces in Ableton, but when he's mixing and mastering, he's using Logic, or, you know, and I mean, you know, even like on my iPad, like I'll I'll rock hard on my iPad and that little Chord Gadget software. You ever mess with that? Oh, super, super fun. But yeah, so really, it's important to just like always be a student and always be open-minded and trying all the different things from all the different DAWs and just talking to people, watching videos.
There's a million ways to skin the cat, but I think usually the fastest way from A to B, from your imagination to realizing something or expressing it, is the best way to go. So it doesn't matter what software you use.
Yes, definitely. All right, cool. Well, hey, thank you so much for watching, and I hope this was a fun and educational experience. If you want to learn more about Splatinum and about Andrew's work, you should definitely check them out, as well as you're doing some work with Creative Live, too, and a bunch of it. Like, why don't you give us some plugs here, man?
Yeah.
People are going to want to know.
I'm about to drop, like, 8 hours of sort of the nuts and bolts of the foundations of Ableton and talk about the physics and science of sound, and lots of great beginner tutorial videos on creativelive.com. Pretty cool website, lots of learning happening over there. And Jack and I are actually getting ready to drop some pretty cool sample kits called the Premix.
Oh yeah, they're really cool. They're like drum rack kind of starting points for laptop battling.
Ooh, yes.
Because the laptop battle scene
there's lots cooking up.
Back, baby.
We're really excited about raising the bar for performance these days and curating a community around that. So hopefully we'll meet you online, and please do hit us up. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, lots of love, everybody. I'm ill.Gates, Andrew Luck from Splatinum, and our man Jack. Thank you, guys.
Boom.
Photonic boom.
Photonic boom. All right, lots of love, everybody. We'll see you next time. Peace. Oh.